You are about to discover 10 white and colorless stones found across the United States that most people would assume are worth almost nothing. Some can look like ordinary quartz, cloudy glass, or pale rocks that are easy to ignore, but several of them can become extraordinarily valuable. Valuable enough that the right specimen could be worth more than the car parked in your driveway. These are real natural gemstones and minerals, not costume jewelry or lab-made imitations. And the biggest mistake people make with white stones is simple. They assume white means boring, so they walk straight past the exact stones they should be looking at more carefully. These are 10 white stones in the USA that could be worth more than your car. And number 10 begins with Goshanite. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Number 10. Goshanite, the colorless beryl hidden in Maine. In the pegmatite fields of Maine, some of the most easily overlooked crystals are also the ones that deserve a second look. One of them is Goshanite. At first, there is nothing dramatic about it. The crystal may be nearly colorless, sometimes so clear that it can resemble ordinary quartz. But chemically, Goshanite is beryl, the same mineral species that produces emerald and aquamarine. That connection changes the way the stone is viewed. Emerald becomes valuable because chromium or vanadium gives beryl its green color. Aquamarine owes its blue tones largely to iron. Goshanite is what beryl can look like when those coloring elements are largely absent. In Maine, beryl-bearing pegmatites have been worked since the 19th century. These coarse-grained rocks can produce crystals far larger than most people expect, sometimes with broad hexagonal faces and remarkably clean interiors. That is where an ordinary-looking clear crystal can become something much more serious. A Goshanite crystal becomes especially desirable when several rare qualities appear together: substantial size, strong transparency, sharp natural faces, an undamaged termination, and very little internal fracturing. Finding one of those features is not unusual. Finding all of them in the same crystal is much harder, and that difference matters. A large crystal can lose much of its appeal if the termination is broken. A transparent specimen can be impressive until internal fractures become visible. But when a crystal comes out of the rock with its natural geometry still intact and enough clarity to show the structure of the stone from one side to the other, collectors begin to look at it very differently. The six-sided form of beryl is one of the most important visual clues. In fine specimens, those natural faces can be so clean and sharply defined that the crystal looks almost engineered, even though every surface formed underground. That is the real appeal of Goshanite. Its value does not come from dramatic color. It comes from finding a crystal that nature managed to grow large, clear, complete, and unusually well preserved. And when all of those conditions come together in a single specimen from a classic American locality, the stone can move far beyond what its simple appearance suggests. Number 10 begins with a crystal that hides its value behind transparency. Number 9 does something even stranger. It belongs to a gemstone family famous for color, yet the rare version we are looking for has almost none at all. Number 9, acrowite tourmaline, the main gem that lost its color. Tourmaline built its reputation on color. The best-known crystals can glow pink, green, blue, or even carry several colors through a single stone. Maine became famous for exactly that kind of material, especially after spectacular discoveries at Mount Mica and Nuri. USGS records show that tourmaline mining at Mount Mica began in 1822, while Nuri later produced enormous quantities of high-quality material. Then there is the version that seems to break the rules. Acrowite tourmaline, instead of advertising itself with vivid color, acrowite can be nearly transparent. That makes it easy to underestimate, especially in rough form. But in Maine, colorless tourmaline has appeared in the same pegmatite districts that produce some of America's most celebrated colored tourmalines. USGS specifically records Maine tourmaline, ranging all the way from deep greens and reds to completely colorless crystals. And one discovery shows just how unusual the colorless material can become. Near Nuri, Maine, a tourmaline crystal was cut into a 6.39 carat double cabochon. One side was pink. The other was essentially colorless acrowite. Under light, the pale side produced a sharp, silvery white cat's eye. The effect came from microscopic growth tubes aligned inside the colorless portion of the stone. As the gem moved beneath the light, the bright band appeared to open and close across the surface. GIA documented the phenomenon and traced it directly to those internal structures. That is the moment acrite stops looking empty. Its lack of color becomes the background for something much rarer. And Maine has produced enough extraordinary tourmaline to show what can happen when the right crystal pocket opens. In 1972, miners near Newry uncovered what became known as the Big Find. More than a ton of tourmaline rough was recovered between 1972 and 1974. And decades later, stones from that discovery were still being selected for one-of-a-kind jewelry projects. For a serious buyer, an acrite with unusual size, clean transparency, historic Maine provenance, or a rare optical effect is no longer just colorless tourmaline. It becomes the exception inside a gemstone family built on color. And exceptions are exactly where value can become difficult to predict. A stone that looks almost invisible in the hand can carry a geological feature that appears only after cutting, under the right light, and at exactly the right angle. That makes number 9 very different from Goshanite. Goshanite hides its importance behind simplicity. Acrite can hide an entire optical surprise inside a stone that appears to have nothing there at all. And number 8 takes deception even further. Its name itself was given because this white crystal was so easily mistaken for something far more common. Number 8, Phenakite, the Colorado crystal named for deception. Some gemstones announce themselves immediately. Phenakite does the opposite. A clear crystal pulled from the mountains of Colorado can look so ordinary that it may be mistaken for quartz before anyone realizes what it actually is. That confusion is so closely tied to the mineral that even its name reflects it. Phenakite comes from a Greek root associated with deception, a fitting name for a stone that can disguise itself as something far more common. In Colorado, colorless phenakite has been found around Mount Antero and White Mountain, 2 high-elevation localities known for beryllium-bearing minerals. USGS records specifically document colorless, faceable phenakite from these areas. But the real story is not simply where it comes from. It is what happens after the crystal is found. In rough form, phenakite may seem almost plain. Its color gives away very little. There is no obvious visual signal telling someone that the material deserves special attention. Then the stone is cut. Suddenly, the same crystal can show a much sharper brilliance than its rough appearance suggested. That transformation is what makes phenakite dangerous to underestimate. The rough stone may look quiet. The finished gem can look completely different, and the gap between those two appearances is where value begins to hide. For cutters, the challenge is finding a crystal that contains enough clean material to survive faceting. Internal fractures can destroy the potential of an otherwise impressive piece. A large crystal may produce very little usable gem material once damaged areas are removed. So when a Colorado phenakite is both large and unusually clean inside, the equation changes quickly. The crystal is no longer being judged by how ordinary it looks in the rock. It is being judged by what may be hidden inside it. A single transparent section can become the difference between an interesting mineral specimen and a finished gemstone with far greater appeal. That is why experienced eyes do not dismiss a pale Colorado crystal simply because it resembles quartz. The important question comes later: how much flawless material survived inside? Because with phenakite, the most valuable part of the stone may be completely invisible until someone knows exactly what to look for. And that makes number 8 one of the easiest stones on this list to walk past. Number 7 is harder to ignore. Its crystals can grow so large that the first reaction is not whether the stone is valuable. It is whether something that big can actually be gem quality. Number 7, colorless topaz, the giant crystal that can hide a fortune. With some gemstones, the excitement begins when a tiny flash of color appears in the rock. With colorless topaz, it can begin with something much heavier. A crystal large enough to fill the palm of a hand can emerge from a pocket looking remarkably clean, almost like a block of clear ice. And because topaz is capable of forming crystals far larger than many familiar gemstones, the first impression can be extraordinary. But size alone tells almost nothing about what the stone is actually worth. The real question begins inside the crystal. How much of it can survive the cutter? Topaz has excellent hardness, but it also possesses something that makes large rough especially tricky: perfect cleavage. That means the crystal can split cleanly along a particular internal direction. A careless blow can ruin material that survived underground for millions of years. Even a specimen that looks solid from the outside may contain fractures positioned exactly where a cutter does not want them. So when a large colorless topaz crystal is examined, professionals are not simply admiring its weight. They are mentally looking through it, searching for clean zones, studying fractures, checking how the crystal might be oriented, estimating how much transparent material could remain after cutting, and sometimes that calculation changes everything. Imagine a large piece of rough that appears almost ordinary because it has no strong color. Inside, however, sits a broad section of clean, transparent topaz with enough depth to produce a substantial finished gemstone. Suddenly, the rough is no longer just a large white crystal. It contains possibilities. One large stone, perhaps several smaller gems, or, if the shape and clarity are exceptional enough, a specimen that is more valuable left exactly as nature produced it. That uncertainty is part of what makes large topaz so compelling. Two crystals of similar weight can end up in completely different worlds. One may be crossed by fractures and yield very little. The other may contain an unusually large volume of clean material, the kind of rough cutters and collectors immediately recognize as difficult to encounter again. And because colorless topaz does not advertise itself with a vivid hue, its potential can remain hidden until someone understands what the crystal can become. What looks like a massive piece of transparent stone may actually contain a gemstone whose final value is determined by decisions measured in millimeters. One wrong cut can destroy that potential. One perfect window through the rough can reveal it. And number 6 presents an even stranger problem, because the next white stone is made of one of the most common minerals on Earth. Yet certain American specimens have become anything but ordinary. Number 6, rock crystal quartz. Quartz is so common that most people barely notice it. That is exactly what makes Arkansas such an exception. Deep in the Ouachita Mountains, miners have opened pockets containing clear quartz crystals on a scale that seems almost impossible for such a familiar mineral. Individual crystals from Arkansas have reached 5 feet in length and more than 500 pounds, while entire crystal clusters have been recovered weighing more than 10 tons. At that size, the discovery is no longer a question of finding a pretty stone. It becomes an extraction problem. Imagine opening a cavity in the mountain and realizing that the crystal plate inside is too large to lift by hand. Every point has grown naturally from the matrix. Some are perfectly clear near their terminations. Others cross one another in dense groups. And before the specimen can ever reach a collector, it has to come out of the ground without being shattered. That is where the stakes begin. A heavy machine can expose the pocket, but it cannot decide where a hidden fracture runs. A careless movement can snap off a crystal that took millions of years to form. And once an important point is broken, no amount of polishing can put the original specimen back together. Arkansas Geological Survey notes that clear single crystals and clusters from the state are internationally recognized for their beauty, and that the mineralogical community has regarded Arkansas quartz as some of the finest and purest in the world. Large, exceptionally developed crystals and clusters can be worth thousands of dollars. The reason begins about 245 million years ago. Hot mineral-rich fluids moved through fractures in the rocks of the Ouachita Mountains. As those fluids cooled, silica crystallized inside open spaces, slowly building the transparent points that now make places such as Mount Ida almost synonymous with American rock crystal. But the specimens that command the most attention are not simply the largest. A massive cluster becomes far more impressive when dozens of crystals remain undamaged, their faces bright, their terminations clear, and the entire composition still attached to its natural matrix. At that point, the specimen begins to resemble something nature designed rather than something that happened by accident. And that is the strange thing about Arkansas quartz. The mineral itself is everywhere. A truly extraordinary specimen is not. One pocket can contain tons of ordinary material, and somewhere inside it, a single formation worthy of a museum or major private collection. So number 6 proves that rarity does not always mean finding a rare mineral. Sometimes it means finding an almost impossible version of a common one. And number 5 changes the rules again. Because the next white stone can look dull and milky in your hand, until light enters it and suddenly the entire surface erupts with color. Number 5. White precious opal, Nevada's stone that comes alive in the light. In Nevada's Virgin Valley, a freshly uncovered stone can look disappointingly ordinary. Its body may be pale, milky, even chalky enough to disappear among the surrounding rock. Then it is turned toward the light. A flash of green appears. The angle changes and blue replaces it. Another movement brings orange, yellow, or red across the surface that seemed almost lifeless seconds earlier. This is white precious opal. And unlike most gemstones, its value is not revealed by body color alone. What matters is the phenomenon moving inside it. Play of color. Precious opal forms when extremely small silica spheres become arranged with enough regularity to interact with visible light. Instead of simply reflecting from the surface, light is diffracted through that microscopic structure and separated into changing spectral colors. The result can turn an otherwise white stone into something that seems to shift every time it moves. Virgin Valley in northern Nevada became famous after precious opal was discovered there in the early 20th century. The volcanic deposits of the region have produced white, crystal, and other varieties of opal, sometimes replacing ancient organic material buried in the ash. But two white opals of the same size can be separated by an enormous difference in desirability. One may show only a weak flicker when tilted. Another can erupt with broad patches of color across nearly the entire stone. Collectors and cutters pay attention to how bright those colors are, how much of the surface they cover, how many colors appear, and whether the pattern remains visible from multiple angles. Red is especially important. It sits at the long wavelength end of the visible spectrum and requires a silica structure capable of producing that part of the play of color. When intense red appears alongside strong green, blue, and orange, a pale piece of opal can become dramatically more desirable. But Virgin Valley adds another complication. Some opal from the region contains significant water and can become unstable as it dries. A spectacular fresh specimen may begin developing fine fractures, known as crazing, permanently changing a stone that looked exceptional when it first came from the ground. The reference material specifically warns that promising Virgin Valley opal is often kept moist during initial evaluation for this reason. That means the discovery is only the beginning. The stone still has to survive. And when a white Nevada opal combines powerful play of color, desirable pattern, useful size, and enough stability to remain intact, its pale body becomes almost irrelevant. What matters is the light trapped inside it. A stone that looked white in the ground can suddenly display nearly every color the eye can see. And number 4 hides its value in a completely different way, because the next American gemstone can also appear almost colorless until one tiny ingredient inside the crystal changes everything. Number 4, colorless Oregon sunstone. A miner in the high desert of southern Oregon can pick up a piece of feldspar that seems to offer almost nothing. The outside may be nearly colorless. There may be no obvious red, no strong green, and none of the glitter people normally associate with sunstone. But cutting that crystal too quickly or dismissing it entirely can be a costly mistake. Because with Oregon sunstone, what appears on the outside does not always reveal what is waiting deeper inside. Oregon sunstone is a transparent feldspar found in ancient lava flows in the south-central part of the state. Its most important secret is copper. Tiny amounts of copper influence the colors and optical effects that have made this one of America's most distinctive native gemstones. Oregon officially designated sunstone as its state gemstone in 1987, and some crystals begin almost completely colorless. GIA has documented Oregon sunstone ranging from colorless material through yellow, pink, orange, red, green, and blue-green. But researchers have discovered something especially interesting about the way those colors can occur inside a crystal. In many specimens, the colorless zone near the surface can actually be wider than the colored zone deeper inside. That creates an extraordinary situation. A rough crystal may arrive on the cutting table looking pale and unremarkable. Then the cutter begins removing material. A faint, warm tone appears. Another section comes away. Suddenly, a concentrated red or green zone begins to emerge from inside what had looked like an almost colorless stone. At that point, every decision matters. Cut too deeply and valuable color can disappear. Choose the wrong orientation and two beautiful colors may never appear together in the finished gem. But orient the stone correctly, and a hidden color boundary can become the centerpiece of a spectacular bicolor or tricolor gemstone. That matters because GIA identifies intense red, deep green, and strongly bicolored Oregon sunstones among the finest quality material, while large faceted stones are comparatively uncommon. Copper can create another surprise as well. When reflective copper inclusions are large enough, they produce aventurescence, a metallic-looking flash that seems to ignite inside the stone as it moves. So the pale exterior is not necessarily the story. Sometimes it is only the cover. A nearly colorless Oregon crystal can conceal the exact combination of color, copper, and usable gem material that a cutter hopes to discover only after the first careful window is open. And number 3 requires no hidden color at all. Its secret is much harder. It is sapphire, without the blue. Number 3, colorless Montana sapphire, the sapphire that lost its blue. Most people think they know what sapphire looks like. Blue, deep, rich, unmistakable blue. That expectation is exactly what makes colorless Montana sapphire so easy to misread. In the gravel deposits of Montana, sapphire can appear as a pale, almost transparent pebble with none of the color people associate with the stone. Without that familiar blue, it can look surprisingly ordinary. But chemically, nothing important is missing. It is still corundum, the same mineral species as blue sapphire, the same mineral species as ruby. And with a hardness of 9 on the Mohs scale, it remains one of the hardest natural gemstones on Earth. The reference script specifically notes that Montana's alluvial deposits can produce white and nearly colorless sapphire alongside the state's better-known blue and pink material. That is where the story becomes interesting. Montana sapphires were first discovered in the 1860s when gold prospectors working river gravels began encountering unfamiliar hard crystals mixed with the material they were washing. At first, they were not the treasure anyone was looking for. Gold was, but those pale stones kept appearing, and eventually Montana developed into one of America's most important sapphire-producing regions, with deposits along the Missouri River and later at places such as Rock Creek. The difficult part is that colorless sapphire does not advertise its identity. A pale crystal can sit beside quartz and other transparent stones and look almost interchangeable. But hardness changes the equation. Corundum is dramatically harder than quartz. A crystal that resists abrasion and survives years of transport through river gravels can retain features that softer minerals lose. For a gem cutter, however, hardness is only the beginning. What matters is what the rough can produce. A large colorless sapphire with strong transparency, minimal inclusions, and enough clean depth to cut an important finished stone is far harder to encounter than a small cloudy crystal. And because sapphire is usually valued for color, truly clean, colorless material occupies an unusual position. It has none of the visual shortcuts that make blue sapphire immediately desirable. The stone has to succeed through clarity, brilliance, size, and cutting quality alone. That makes exceptional material brutally honest. There is nowhere for fractures to hide, nowhere for cloudiness to disappear behind strong color. Every internal feature becomes visible. So when a Montana sapphire emerges nearly colorless, unusually clean, and large enough to yield a substantial finished gem, what looked like an anonymous river pebble begins to enter a completely different category. The blue may be missing, the sapphire is not, and number 2 pushes the idea of a white American gemstone even further, because the next stone can look almost colorless in daylight, but under the right conditions, its real identity becomes impossible to ignore. Number 2, white nephrite jade, Wyoming's pale stone with a hidden reputation. Wyoming is not the first place most people associate with jade, yet for decades the state has been one of the classic American sources of nephrite, the tougher of the two materials traditionally called jade. And among the green, gray, brown, and mottled material, there is a much quieter variety that can be especially striking when the quality is right: white nephrite jade. Nephrite is not a single crystal in the usual sense. It is made from an extremely dense, interlocking mass of amphibole fibers, and that structure gives it extraordinary toughness. USGS identifies nephrite as a calcium-magnesium silicate and records its possible colors as including white, deep green, and creamy brown. That toughness is exactly why jade has been carved for thousands of years. But with white nephrite, color changes the entire character of the stone. Instead of the dark green appearance many people expect, fine material can look creamy, pale, or almost porcelain-like. When the texture is exceptionally even and the stone is free from distracting dark inclusions, fractures, or patches of discoloration, the surface can develop a soft glow after polishing rather than the sharp sparkle of a faceted gemstone. That is what experienced jade buyers look for. Not brilliance, not fire. Texture, purity, evenness. A large piece of rough may look promising from the outside, but once it is cut open, dark mineral spots or fractures can run through the interior and immediately reduce what can be carved from it. The valuable piece is the one that stays clean. Imagine a pale Wyoming boulder being sawn for the first time. The outer rind gives no guarantee of what is inside. Then the blade passes through and reveals a broad section of uniform, fine-grained nephrite with almost no dark interruptions. Now the stone is no longer just rough. It becomes material large enough for an important carving, a substantial cabochon, or a collector piece where every usable inch matters. Wyoming's connection with nephrite reaches deep into its ancient geology. USGS studies of the Granite Mountains describe nephrite veins associated with Precambrian rocks, more than 2 billion years old. So when an unusually large piece of pale nephrite survives that history with excellent texture and clean internal material, its value can rise far beyond what the rough exterior suggests. There is no sparkle to warn you, no bright color demanding attention, only a dense white stone whose real quality may not be known until the first cut is made. And number one leaves no such uncertainty, because the final white stone on this list has already produced individual American finds valued in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Number 1. White diamond, Arkansas stones worth a fortune. The final stone on this list does not need an imaginary price tag. Arkansas has already produced the proof. In 1924, a worker searching a diamond-bearing field near Murfreesboro noticed a pale crystal in the soil. In rough form, it did not resemble the perfectly polished stones displayed beneath jewelry store lights. It weighed 40.23 carats. The crystal became known as the Uncle Sam diamond, the largest diamond ever discovered in the United States. After cutting, only a fraction of that original weight remained, but that smaller, finished diamond ultimately entered a market where a single white stone could carry the value of a major purchase. And Uncle Sam was not the last Arkansas discovery to prove the point. Decades later, in 1990, Shirley Strawn found another pale crystal at what is now Crater of Diamonds State Park. The rough weighed only 3.03 carats. Nothing about that number sounds enormous. Then the stone was cut. What emerged was the Strawn-Wagner diamond, weighing 1.09 carats and graded by the American Gem Society as a perfect 0/0/0 cut. Arkansas State Parks describes it as one of the world's most perfect diamonds. The state of Arkansas later purchased the stone for $34,700 in 1998. Then came another reminder of what can still be hidden beneath that Arkansas soil. In 2015, Bobby Oscarson found an 8.52 carat white diamond at the park and named it Esperanza. After months of planning and cutting, it became a 4.6 carat finished diamond. Its reported appraisal, $1 million. That is the difference between white diamond and almost every stone that came before it. There is no need to imagine what an exceptional specimen might someday become. It has already happened. And the rough appearance makes the story even more remarkable. Natural diamonds from Arkansas can emerge with a frosted or slightly greasy-looking surface, rather than the brilliant sparkle most people associate with diamond. Their journey began far below Earth's surface, where carbon crystallized under extraordinary pressure before volcanic activity carried the diamonds upward. So a person walking across the field is not necessarily searching for something that looks valuable. They are searching for something whose value has not been revealed yet. A pale crystal in the dirt, a few carats of rough material. Then cutting, grading, and examination reveal what was hiding there all along. Arkansas remains especially unusual because visitors at Crater of Diamonds State Park can search the diamond-bearing field and legally keep the diamonds they discover. That means the most valuable white stone in this countdown is not locked inside a royal vault or accessible only to professional mining companies. Examples have literally been picked up from American soil. And when the right combination of size, clarity, color, and crystal quality appears, the comparison with the price of a car stops sounding exaggerated. Sometimes the stone is worth considerably more. White stones are easy to underestimate. They can look plain, pale, or almost completely ordinary until the right combination of rarity, size, clarity, and quality changes everything. And as the Arkansas diamonds prove, sometimes that difference can be worth far more than anyone would expect from a stone pulled straight from the ground. So the next time a white or colorless stone catches your eye, it may be worth looking twice. Because in the world of gemstones, the stones that look the simplest can sometimes hide the biggest surprises. If you enjoyed this journey through America's most overlooked white gemstones, explore the channel for more rare stones, extraordinary discoveries, and the stories hidden beneath the surface.